Welcome to the Patriots Prayer Podcast. Here we don't just play to your feelings. We're rooted in honesty, and our foundation is based on Christian values, conservative beliefs, and a no-holds-barred approach. So if your feelings clash with reality, it's not reality that needs adjusting. If you're ready for an unfiltered view of the world, we're here to challenge the official narratives and confront the overwhelming tide of misinformation and call out wrongdoing wherever we find it. See, truth is our compass and God is our only judge. Right and wrong mean more to us here at the Patriots Prayer than right and left do. And a complacent, blind acceptance of the status quo will not be found here. We do not believe that things are this bad in our country merely by accident. So we investigate and dive deep in each episode and tackle pressing issues head on. Many podcasts claim that they're unfiltered, but here we actually mean it. So guys, welcome to the Patriots Prayer Network. We are going to be diving in to what I hope is going to be just a massacre. I'm hoping beyond hope. Larry, let me switch monitors so I can. There we go. A little better. I'm hoping to God that this debate is not like the previous one. If this debate looks anything like that previous one, I'm 100% advocating for JD Vance just to walk off stage. He'll win by walking away. Honest to God, I don't want to see another, 3-against-1 style debate going on here. I don't think any of us do. I think we're tired. Listen. The other night, guys, I saw a post, as many of you know, went out to the edge of town, see this 43-foot, this monstrosity of a statue. And in the statue, they are lynching Donald Trump. This is who they are, folks. This is who they are. This is what they are. It's never going to get any better, but I can promise you this. If Kamala is elected president, God forbid, it will get so much worse. Did you hear? They're advocating. The number one thing it seems like these guys are fighting for is to shut us up. We don't want you guys. Essentially is what I'm hearing from them, right? They don't want us. I think this light it's a little too bright in here. I don't know. To me, it's a little too bright. I see some shadows that I don't necessarily want to see. Let's see if we can. Oh, there we go. A little less light, a little better, a little mood lighting. Anyway, these guys are going to get no better. They're advocating to censor you. They're advocating to censor me. They're advocating to censor everyone on this network. And I'll tell you what, if they win, they will. They absolutely will. You've seen what happened to Parler, right? You remember Parler? Well, they're finally bouncing back. Shout out to Parler. We've talked to some of the leadership over there, and those guys are amazing. And I'm glad to see that they've bounced back, and they're going to be doing big things with their platform. Expect to see the Patriots Prayer Network on Parler. As soon as they get their streaming set up and everyone can stream, you know what I can't wait for? I can't wait also for Truth Social to get streaming capability. That's going to be something cool. So we're looking forward to all of that, guys. I think that, like most of us, we really do depend on these networks. These guys that want to tell the truth. These guys that are fighting for freedom of speech. Listen to me. Freedom of speech. And just like JD Vance said in my intro video prior to, if you're on Rumble and looking, JD Vance says it is the foundation of our democracy. He's not wrong. He is absolutely 100% not wrong. Alexa, what network has the debate on? I forgot what network the damn debate was on. Alexa, what network is the debate on?
Tim Walz and J.D. Vance have agreed to an October 1st debate in New York City, hosted by CBS News at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Okay.
CBS Evening News anchor Nora O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan of Face the Nation will moderate.
So
the debate will be broadcast on the CBS television network and can be streamed on all platforms where CBS News 24/7 and Paramount Plus are available. The debate will also be made available to simulcast.
And it cost me 99. On a prison farm.
Alexa, pause. I want to get this at least queued up. Not quite sure what the hell is going on here. Of course, the debate, they would make it a little harder on that day. There it goes. It wasn't the software, it was the operator, guys. I apologize, it was the operator. So we are going to be we're going to be doing a lot of commentating, fact checking in the moment. We don't want the same stuff that went down in the last debate. They pulled the Jedi mind trick on everyone in the last debate. Donald Trump wiped the floor with Kamala Harris, and because she showed up and she could speak coherently, for some reason, they thought that automatically means that she wins. Well, there used to be a standard for winning. Remember standards? Standard for winning means you actually made good points. The things that you were saying were true and you won up to people. Kamala didn't do any of that. Kamala didn't. She lied, and most of her responses were all fibs completely. We have plenty of soldiers in active duty positions in combat zones across the United States. And guys, I just want to start this off by honest to God saying this. Everyone has seen the news that Israel was attacked today by Iran. 500 missiles, from my understanding. 500. Pray for the folks of Israel. Pray for them. Because they are surrounded by enemies, guys. That's why I know they're God's people. They are surrounded by enemies and they still stand tall. They're supposed to be able to depend on the United States as allies, to have their back. Do you really think that Joe Biden is going to have their back when it counts? He's already capitulated to Iran time and again. $6 billion he gave them. Well, Obama sent them cash on pallets. So, no, they need our prayers, guys, and they need an administration that will stand by them and stand with them as this, as these things occur. Well, we will be joined by several hosts on PPN here shortly. And I believe Nate Kane will be logging in. And I believe Maurice will be logging in. I'm hoping Steve will be too. So they just said they will be here soon. But did you see, guys, there was big news that happened just before we went live. Trump ended up taking the lead in a few key swing states. Let's talk about it until we got about 13 minutes before the debate goes live. So Trump is now ahead in Arizona, Georgia, and in North Carolina. So those states a month ago, 2 out of 3 of those states, Kamala was ahead in. This just goes to show you the polling numbers don't work. They're not going to be honest with you in the polling numbers. They're not real, guys. They're not real. And as a result, I think that they've snowed a lot of people into believing this race is close. What's going on, lady?
Hello, long time no see.
Right? What's going on back here? Jersey Shore.
I'm in an unusual place. I'm not home.
No. Someone changed my brand for the background. I don't know who's in there, but they changed it. But anyway, I got it. I'll change it back.
Not all right. Me for a change.
Little stuff. Did you see the polling numbers? It looks like Trump pulled ahead in 3 key swing states: Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, even after the judge the other day basically went against the will of the people, and he got rid of the 6-week with the heartbeat ban, right?
Yes.
He said it was unconstitutional for us to institute a heartbeat ban, and then he returned it to a 22 or 23 week range. But to say that it was due to constitutionality makes no sense, because the reason why the issue was returned to the states was because the Supreme Court have ruled this has nothing to do with the Constitution.
Right. So, I mean, was he referring to the state constitution? I mean,
nope. He just said that we're going to put it back to what it was before, even though the people of the state clearly made their wills known. They voted on this issue, and they wanted the heartbeat ban. The legislature that represented those folks passed that law, and the judge undid what they wanted. So much for a democratic process, because they do not tend, obviously they're not going to rule by democratic processes. They're going to rule by fiat the same way Biden did. My fear is what I talked about before you came, is the same thing goes with if Kamala were to take office. The first thing that's going to go are podcasts like ours. If you listen to them speak over the last few months, it's exactly what they keep saying over and over and over. Yesterday,
years saying it. Yeah.
But 3 days ago, John Kerry said the first, and I'm paraphrasing, right? So he said the First Amendment is getting in their way. That pesky First Amendment is stopping us.
That's what he said. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, and then she said the same thing. If I'm not drinking, this is H2 water, by the way. If you see me drinking glowing water, it's not absinthe, guys. It's an H2 bottle, and it actually works. I'll be very honest with you.
What is it? Is it one of those pH balance things?
Yes. So I have it's $100 bottle by a company called H2, and you fill it with water and you push the button here. And what it does is it infuses the water with hydrogen. And when you drink it, if you drink it about a full bottle 3 times a day, you will start about 2-3 days into this. And they said I wouldn't notice any difference for about 2 to 3 weeks. That's not true.
What
and
is
it
the
made,
difference?
so I clear headed, more like focus, more energy, more pep. You know what? We tend to want to find a cozy corner and sit there, and I'm tired. you get. But over the last, I would say, week or so, I'm making lists. I'm following through on all of those things that I've been wanting to do, and keeping up, with my day job, this thing, moving. I'm just getting a lot more done, and I'm a lot more clear headed, a lot more positive and upbeat. So on top of that, a few days ago, I started an ashwagandha and lion's mane regimen as well. So
that's good stuff.
That is awesome stuff, guys. If you don't know, I was one of those guys like, I don't know, that new agey bullshit. Like, it works.
It's
It
not.
works.
It's actually like old agey in a way. It's people used to use turn to the earth for their medicine and for their healing, and now
That's what turned me off of it, though. When people say it's the return to the earth, I'm like, you hippie. Give me good old pharmaceuticals, but no, I feel a ton better.
Tell me about this bottle. Where'd you get it? Like
I got it. I got it from it was a gift. I didn't purchase it myself. I saw it online. I was looking at them on a TikTok shop, and I was kind of admiring it. And my wife saw me admiring it because I don't drink water because God didn't put any flavor in it, and I don't know why. But she saw me admiring it, and she purchased one for herself and one for me. And my water intake has gone way up just because I'm such a damn gadget whore. It's not even funny. If I didn't have to put this in a gadget bottle and push a gadget button,
it's kind of cool though.
I probably wouldn't drink it, but it works.
What's the name of it again?
H2
water bottle.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna get one just because I actually been having an energy problem, and I will try anything at this point.
I don't endorse. I have a hard time. I'm not going to endorse anything. I'm telling you, it literally works. It works, and the what you do with it is you can actually infuse it even more, because if you take, like, when you fill it to the top, if you take a little pinch of salt, when I say little, I mean little pinch of salt, and there it infuses even more, so you can kind of extra charge it. But what you do is it's not for sipping. You let the bubbles form inside of the bottle, and it'll get like a milky looking texture to it. Okay. And when it's airtight. So when you take this airtight lid off, you throw it back as much as you can. So you're literally trying to take it all in big gulps.
I'll try it, but this sounds weird, but I'll try it.
It works.
Hey, but maybe this is why Tim Walz dances out onto the stage. Maybe he's got one of these.
What a dumbass guy, I swear. I just learned the day that he intentionally. It sucks. This is so true, but it sucks. This guy intentionally got married on the day on the Tiananmen Square massacre anniversary.
Yeah, right. So I heard that it was the anniversary. It was intentional.
Yeah, because he was in China during the Tiananmen Square massacre.
He wasn't. He lied and said that he that was a lie. That's just come out that he said he was there. Yep. He said he was there.
That's even worse. That's even worse, because now he's glorifying something so much that he made up a story saying he was there even though he wasn't.
Yeah.
Either way, it's just terrible. But he did just get back from a Chinese whatever. He was just over there right before this debate. He just got back.
So I also just want you to know that the way where I found out that was a lie, that he wasn't there, was from the New York Times. I just think that's interesting.
Because they've always been trustworthy.
No, but they're on his side. Like, they're not going to point out that I think it's interesting if they're.
I think they're all on their side, Elena. I think that every one of them are on their side until they see the writing on the wall, and then they change sides. Just like Mark Zuckerberg sees the writing on the wall. So what does he do? He comes out and says all sorts of nice things about Biden. When CBS, NBC, and the New York Times all saw they could no longer fight the laptop story, they all validated the laptop. They always do those kinds of things until they're like, okay, guys, we can't take this position anymore. We're going to lose. So let's tell everybody.
Changed position. I think it's that they tell just enough truth to make themselves seem credible. That's what I think. That's what that is. It's more of just just enough, just barely enough, so they can say all the other bullshit.
Look, I would agree.
Yeah, I don't really think they've changed their position. Yeah,
I would completely agree on that. They tell you just enough truth to be able to say, we got this right, and we got this right, and we got this right, and then just completely omit all of the rest of the things that they didn't get right.
Yeah.
Here, when I can't,
But they're making, by saying they didn't get it right, it almost implies as if they're making mistakes. They're not making mistakes. They know
there's no
what they're
mistakes.
doing. Yeah, I know
I
exactly.
mean, for as much as we know, because we read a lot, we study daily. I mean, I had to take a little break most recently, just for a few days. I had to. I was having a hard time sleeping. I was having a hard time focusing at my work because
Yeah.
I was so just all day, all night. And I tell people all the time, and you've heard me say my little passionate go at. People don't realize how much work this is. It's
No.
a lot of freaking work, dude.
Yeah,
It's a
fun.
lot.
It's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. Yeah.
It's an extreme amount of work. I mean, we all work very hard, except Nate Kane. Nate doesn't work very hard at all. Outside
He's
of
got
that,
a reputation. He's for sitting around. Yeah.
how's it going, Nate?
It's going good, brother.
I'm not streaming to your channel, Elena. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can go and stream, and there's one more spot. Stream to it.
I don't want to mess up the.
You're not messing up. Here, I'll choose it. Why
don't you do it? Because I will ruin it.
Which one are you going to?
What do you mean? The
What channel are you going to? Oh, I see you. You want to go to your YouTube, or do you want to go to your X?
X has a bigger, but more people will be watching on X, I think.
Okay, there you go.
Bigger reach.
Did Tim Walz go to China?
YouTube will get in trouble.
So, did you guys see the video I put out of a 43-foot naked Trump statue?
Yeah,
I went out.
Yeah. What's the story? Are there any facts on who put up that vulgar? It's so
Okay.
vulgar.
So here's the facts that I know. I got to be careful because it's connected to what I do for a living. I got to be very careful how I phrase this. Because of what I do and because of the property that the statue is on, I wondered even that night, and the crane that it was hanging from, because didn't want to come out and tell us who the artists were. Oh, sorry guys, here I'll tell you the story during break.
All right.
Here we go. Wow, did you hear what he just said?
I can't hear it at all.
Of course not. I got it muted. Here we go.
This is off in the wings for the moment. Oh, there he is.
It's performance. That seems obvious, but no faux pause. And they're looking for a viral moment. That's what they'll be looking for tonight.
No handshake.
No handshake, and there you have it.
That's what we need.
Taking some
That's
notes.
right.
JD Vance doing the same as our colleagues.
And then we were shaking hands before the cameras came.
That's right.
Oh.
Well, we have the vice presidential debate coming up in a moment. It will be moderated by our own Nora O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. Ohio Senator JD Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz
never
take
mind.
the stage. Well, they've taken the stage, so stick with us here and join us all.
He's a weirdo. So anyway, I knew because it was hanging on a crane, right? You guys all know what I do for a living. I think we've talked in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever, in that industry, it's not hard at all for me to say, hey, who rented that? Who got that?
Yeah, right.
And so I've narrowed it down, and I'll know more in the next day or so. And I'm pretty sure I know. I just don't want to get it wrong and say someone's name. So I'm going to wait for verification. But it's a 43-foot nude statue. And it is anatomically correct, except for he does not have, I hate even saying this word online. God forgive me, scrotum. Right? I'm just not, I hate being vulgar. And so I'm out there. I get there. My wife and I, it was like damn near midnight when we got there. And it was on a work night too. But as soon as I saw it, I wanted to go immediately. And so when I get there, there is a 12-year-old girl and a young boy and their mom, and they're out there taking selfies with it. Because that's what you do, guys. If ever you come across a 43-foot tall nude statue, take your kids. It's fun for the whole family. Idiots.
I'm aghast at that. I can't. I find the
So-
whole thing so appalling. If they did it to her, I wouldn't be happy. I mean,
Well,
either.
here's what I did, and that's exactly my point. That was my point when I put this up earlier. I'll show you the post as soon as I find it. All right. So when I went out there, I said that same thing. If we were talking,
Okay, goes up.
oh,
Goes
are
on.
they coming on, or what are they doing? Is this just?
Okay, let's see. Sorry to interrupt. I think it is.
I'm Margaret Brennan.
Oh, they did
In order
a
to have
little handshake.
thoughtful and civil debate. These are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules,
I like that,
and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics.
CBS going to fact check?
The stage is set.
Just the Republicans.
Governor, Senator.
No, everyone has an iPad.
Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but
yeah, that's not what I came for. Guys, how's my video look to you?
Fine.
All right. It's really weird, and I know you guys have experienced some things with StreamYard too. The problem being is that when you get someone in your stream who doesn't have good broadband, because they are connected to your stream, the quality of your video goes down as well.
I wonder if that's me, because I'm
no,
not
all your videos look very good. I was just testing a theory because I called support about it yesterday.
All right, this is on. This is on. That was a question she was asking. Do you mind?
Wow.
on. You have 2 minutes.
Oh, there we
Thank
go.
you, and thank you for those joining.
Let me rewind
tonight.
it 2 seconds.
Let's keep in mind.
Yeah.
Maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started.
It's an interesting thing to comment.
Several unfolding crises. The Middle East is
Did
on
they
the
say
brink
that
of
in
war.
What's that?
They commented we've shared the questions in advance with the campaigns.
No, we haven't shared. We haven't shared, she said.
Right.
Guys, we will be choosing someone at random tonight to give a t-shirt away. We're going to be giving away the I Am an Enemy of Democracy t-shirt. So I'll be looking for someone. We're just going to choose someone at random. We're going to give them a t-shirt.
Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time.
Oh my God.
Governor WALZ, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining home tonight.
Is it
Let's
preemptive?
keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then of course afterwards to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. First of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together so all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor.
So first of all, he just plainly admitted that the Inflation Reduction Act was not actually about reducing inflation and that it was about climate change and the Green New Deal that they want to pass. The majority of what that bill was to further that narrative and continue funding these Green New Deals. So it didn't have anything to do with inflation. If you can't trust them to name a bill properly, how are you going to trust them to manage the money properly that is delegated behind the deception bill that they put forth? They told you it was for one thing, and now they're telling you it was actually for another thing. These people are liars. That's just what they do.
Well, I've been fact checking everything they say as they say it in real time. There is absolutely no evidence. No evidence exists. No studies have had anything conclusive that climate change has caused hurricanes.
That's right.
That's a saying. That's BS. It's absolutely not true.
Even climate scientists who believe in anthropogenic climate change, meaning man-made, climate change, even they will tell you that storms, hurricanes, tropical storms, those things are not caused by climate change. Now, what does cause those things is, I think we're in an El Nino year. You've got cycles and changes that happen. But the other thing too, it really disturbs me that that they continue to push this nonsense. Is what does cause changes in weather patterns is weather engineering, which is something that has been going on in this country and something that they are doing. In fact, China is very involved in this as well. And there's been published studies about how these things that they're spraying in the sky, all of this crap they're putting in the air, it does cause droughts. It does cause weather changes that are anomalous. Nobody's talking about that.
So real quick before we move on, and I pause this, let's talk about the deal that Trump pulled out of, and that had everything to do with the nuclear capabilities. We put a nuclear deal in place with Iran some time ago, and they never abided by any portion of the deal. They enriched uranium far beyond what the deal said they were supposed to. They didn't allow inspectors in several instances, and finally Trump pulled out. And when Biden got in, he reinstated the deal without one inspection, gave them billions of dollars, and now look what Iran has done with that money Biden has given them. All right, so I'm going to unpause it. Here we go.
Mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The
Overwhelming
crisis at the U.S.
consensus
Mexico
of
border
not people who
consistently
are actually
ranks as one of
studying
the top issues
weather changes
for
of
American voters.
our climate. It's
Senator
ridiculous.
Vance.
Hold on, before she asks this question, just so people understand how that works, I know we do, but guys, the way these scientists work is they do their studies based off of grants given them by the federal government. If they don't toe the line and say what the federal government wants them to say in those grants, for instance, I know down at UNLV, there are several departments that do these types of studies. And if I want to do a study that, over here, study A, I will do study B, tell the federal government what they want to hear so that they give me a grant so I can do what I really want to do. So what you don't have a complete consensus because there's no proof of climate change. As a matter of fact, we've only been monitoring the weather over the last 105 years. The weather, the temperature has only seen an increased is only increased 0.5 degrees over that 100 years. So we don't know that prior to that, if that weather has fluctuated in the same way we're seeing in the last century. This is all hocus pocus. Essentially, they're doing guesswork. There is no proof of anything they're saying, and they keep saying it like what they're talking about is an absolute science. It is a theory that they're working off of, and that theory is taxing you, raising the price of your gas, raising the price of goods, building all of these departments, and getting rich.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And they're destroying the ocean with deep sea mining for materials for windmills. They're killing tens of millions of birds a year, plus sea life. And all this science is the same kind of high quality science that we get when we talk about gender affirming care, when we talk about COVID vaccines. So you get a consensus when you get people in a room who agree with you and you lock everybody else out. It's infuriating.
Well,
exactly.
But you remember, you're also paying them. So they agree with you and then you pay them.
Yeah.
So that's how it works, is that you pay them to make the study that you want, the outcome, and then you cherry pick the ones that have the results you want, and then you bring them in, and they can continue getting funding for their future obedience to your narrative. I mean, these things have been going on for a long time.
And then you stop teaching science in schools and you create a dumb population so no one can figure it out.
So Obama's climate czar wrote an entire book on this subject, and I've quoted it before, but the hypothesis at the end of that book essentially said, we don't know, so we're going to err on the side of caution. That's what no matter how much studying you do, how much you put into this, at the end of the day, the real answer, guys, the honest answer is we don't know. That's a fact.
Hey, we got
Your
a
campaign is pledging to carry
hold
out
up.
the
We
largest mass
comment
deportation
really
plan
quick from
in America.
Raven Samuelson. He says, "You four people talking shit about Harris and WALZ are racist idiots. You just don't want a woman of color with a brain in her head in office." I just thought it was funny. I don't really need to respond to this because it's obviously a troll
You're
comment.
racist. You're racist.
Yeah. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, maybe he didn't see me, or maybe he thinks that like that I hate other colored people as well. But it's just interesting to see that there's still trolls around coming in and trying to start up shit
off of a meta platform, though. It's all right. He doesn't realize that I have black friends, so it's okay. Jeez.
I have a black friend.
American history
I've won.
and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil?
No, I'd kick the children out too.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations, and that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what we actually do. So we've got 20, 25
Hey, Mike,
million
you got
aliens who are in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we
don't
start
get the
with the
feedback
criminal
when we bring
migrants.
you in.
About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Do you remember when
do you care to respond to any of those specific
the left was
allegations?
freaking out about Trump separating kids from their parents? Now, what they were doing when
It was
they
Obama
separated them,
that did that.
Well, hold on. But what they were doing when they separated the kids is that they were doing DNA tests, and they were ensuring that the people traveling with them were actually family members and not just human traffickers. And the problem that we've had now is that they don't test for any of that.
They stopped.
If somebody, if somebody just brings a child in, they're like, "Yep, this is my kid," and the kid is being trafficked into known sex slave rings or known sweatshops, which has been documented. They know full well that a lot of these kids are being trafficked into those areas. They just let them through. They don't test anymore. They don't ensure. There's no stops making it harder for traffickers to bring in children to sex slave rings.
Right.
And
that's why we got 320 some odd thousand missing kids.
That's right. The Department of Homeland Security recently, their Office of Inspector General recently released a report on this. And there were over 20,000 children that just in this last year that missed their immigration hearings. They don't know where these kids are. It's absolute insanity what's going on here.
And before we can go forward, I'm looking up the 14th Amendment, and I'm going to tell you that the reason why the anchor baby, right? Everyone acts like it's a racist term, but it's been around forever. We all know what it means, and it's birthright citizenship. And the idea that someone who is born in the United States because their mother or father or family snuck in here and then they had a child on U.S. soil makes them a U.S. citizen is absolutely not factual. The person who has the child on it has to be subject to the laws of the land for the child to receive the protections of the Constitution. It says right here, the key argument rests on the phrase subject to jurisdiction thereof. That is exactly what the Constitution says. The mother and father of that child are not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Their jurisdiction belongs to the country of their origin, not the United States.
This is a problem. It is not the problem. The problem is the fact that we have wide open borders and the fact that the Harris-Biden administration have been stopping Border Patrol from reporting the proper amount of, or the known amount of terrorists coming through the border. I mean, there's more problems in this. The anchor babies aren't the ones creating the issues right now. Like the issue is strictly the open border, the trafficking of drugs, the trafficking of guns, the trafficking of humans. That's the problem. And so when we get, I feel like this is something we're going to have to deal with. But the first thing we have to deal with is stopping the immigration of criminal aliens from all around the world.
Yeah.
Being
and get all 30, all of them out, every one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this guy in the comments, just so you know, just let me expose him for half a second. I went to his profile and he's got a bunch of Russia flags all over his profile, and he's got the Tranifesto, the girl that committed the Nashville shooting and killed all those children. He's got her on his page like a hero worships her. Yeah, her, Audrey Hale. And yeah, he's trash. Un-American trash. Hey, your opinion doesn't matter. You're a little man who probably would never have the same energy you have behind that keyboard should you meet a real patriot in person, weirdo. All right, here we go.
Including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children.
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history. 30% decrease in Ohio.
That's because the peak was so high.
Well, let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the attorney general.
I'm sorry, guys.
How can you
I
tout
just
that
went
as a
over
win?
this. But it's not true. I just had this chart up when me and Ann Funder did the podcast the other day. There are currently right now 300,000 deaths in the United States due to fentanyl poisoning. 300,000. When Trump left office, it was 58. Do the math. He's lying. He's just putting stats out there that are absolutely false. I'm sorry.
Well, he didn't even put a stat out there. He just, well, I guess he said that
they're lower.
The decrease itself, even if it was true, would still look horrific because we've had 100,000 fentanyl poisonings, not overdoses.
Not overdoses.
Right.
Each year since the Biden-Harris administration took over, because people are getting poisoned by this drug that is being trafficked in here.
Yep. Here we go.
Have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children.
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him
the funniest
what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive
I'll be
branch.
really quick with this.
So look, we have the option.
But, okay, when they talk about the bipartisan border bill, they're saying that they have so little influence over our government that Donald Trump, a private citizen, was able to shut it down with a tweet. That's what they're saying. They're saying Donald Trump was able to stop our border bill. And it's like, he's not even part of the government right now. Donald Trump is a private citizen. Are you saying that you lost this bipartisan border bill because a private citizen tweeted at the governors? And I mean, this is an anti-flex. This is them promoting a loss in how ridiculously bad this bill was, that Donald Trump, a private citizen, could shut it down just by opposing it. That it's so funny to me that they tout this as a win. This just shows your incompetence.
The border bill was not comprehensive, and what it did was it allowed up to 4,000 people in every day. The protections in the border bill did not.
It was 10,000.
I'm reading 4,000 right now. It says that the protections in the bill didn't even kick in until 4,000 people crossed the border in a single day. So they couldn't do anything. They had to sit on their hands until 4,000 people crossed in a single day. And even at a rate of 4,000, it's still way more than what Donald Trump was allowing into the country in any single day during the term of his entire presidency. This border bill was not comprehensive, and it helped no one. Beyond that, opioid deaths have decreased, but the level of Americans reporting drug use or drug addiction has increased by 21%. So there's no win here for him.
No.
To do this, Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this, and he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens?
Right.
1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute.
I will
but
say
let me just
that
ask you the question.
Tim Walz is way better at this than Kamala Harris.
Yes.
Like, the way that he's able to construe these talking points, he is leagues above Kamala Harris. Like, I mean, what he's saying is false, but he is a lot better at making his point than I've seen out of Kamala Harris at all. So.
Oh, he's definitely gives a good attempt at trying to be relatable. Now, I'm going to read something here, and I was talking about the DNA, the familial DNA testing at the border for unaccompanied minors that Biden removed. So it says here, and I just fact checked it. It says, yes, the Biden administration ended familial DNA testing program in the USA at the Mexican-U.S. border. It happened in May of 2023 and has been verified. It used to verify the relationships between adults and the children to combat human trafficking and fraudulent claims of family ties at the border. The decision to end the program came when the contract with BODE Technologies, the vendor providing the testing, expired and the Biden administration refused to renew it. And that's what led to this crisis of all these missing children in our country.
That led to it.
Yeah, but this is the reason why they don't know where the children are, because they don't know who got them and they don't know who the children are. Really, they don't even know who the children are. They didn't show up with their birth certificates in their back pockets. Most of them show up with a number written on them or a color on a card that they have that tells them basically what the card tells who they belong to and what they're here for.
If you watched the Joe Rogan Sean Ryan interview recently, the Taliban has actually been creating false documents to sneak people in to this country.
I'm not surprised. Not surprised at all.
So the documentation that they do get, a lot of it's falsified, and they have to accept it as truth. So they don't know who these people are, and they don't know who the kids are. They don't know who the parents are. They don't know anything. They just let them in.
It's crazy. Here we go.
First, the governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill.
It's not a bad.
They helped
it's not
craft
a bad
it.
route to
They're the
take.
ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up
blaming
housing
Kamala
and making
Harris,
them less
not the
affordable.
migrants.
But it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected.
Who were flown in here
but
Thank you.
by
They have
the
so much
Harris
to get
government.
to.
Margaret, I think it's important
We're gonna
because
turn out to the
Unbelievable.
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were
They're
that
The
you guys
economy.
So when he stated that, he said, I believe you want to do this and she doesn't. I think that was a very stupid comment by him, because this is the guy that says if you build a
I don't think so.
25-foot wall, he said it himself. He said, if you build a 25-foot wall, I'll invest in a 30-foot ladder company. So how can you possibly say that he wants to stop immigration?
I think he's creating division between Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I think that that's actually not a terrible strategy to go with.
I'm not
saying
talking
that,
about
like,
the strategy. I'm talking about the comment itself.
oh,
It's,
well,
it's
I mean,
false.
yeah, but he's building rapport with Tim Walz and basically saying that, like, yeah, you are right, but Kamala Harris, the one that you're working for, is wrong. And I think that that's actually not a terrible strategy to go with, even though, because this particular issue isn't going to be a make or break thing for him. It's just, or that particular statement isn't going to be a make or break thing for him. It is just a tactic to kind of inflate the ego of Tim Walz for a second.
I just got a little bit of political PTSD. I don't know who to trust anymore.
Do you think it was appropriate for her to throw that in there, that they have legal status, that our government legally flown these Haitians in? I mean, I don't think that was appropriate.
It's not appropriate, and it doesn't make them good people. What about the Haitian who was flown in on that program to Massachusetts, who molested a 10-year-old boy?
Yeah.
And was recently arrested. I mean, I'm sure there are so many of them committing crimes. It doesn't mean their legal status means nothing. I'm sorry. We got to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Hey,
I'm sure.
When the Germans were loading the Jews into train cars, that was also legal. So legal does not mean moral. Legal does not mean good. Just because something is legal, that is a horrific argument when it comes to something like this, saying that they're overwhelming the system and they're eating the cats and dogs.
Slavery was legal.
Yeah. OMG did it yesterday again. James O'Keefe, he's a beast at this, and he went down to the border. I guess he got there's a whistleblower he was speaking to. I took the time to watch the entire interview, and he's going to be releasing more and more in phases. But that border guard, it had 19 years in. He said, I can't keep quiet anymore. I know I'm getting ready for retirement, but it does not matter. I can't just stay quiet. He said, and that interview's on X. I urge everyone to go take a look at it. That border guard said that the cartel runs the border, that they're literally taking orders from the cartel. The cartel can overwhelm them anytime they want, and these guys can't do anything about it. I mean, it goes much deeper than that. It's a very high level explanation as to what the interview was about, but I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. He said the cartel runs the border. We don't. These guys have tied the hands of our law enforcement agencies at the border.
They have better weapons. The cartels have better weapons than our LEOs.
Hey, really quick, before you hit play, I'm going to be back in a little bit.
All right.
But I'll be back.
All right. So
we're going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app.
Yeah.
Where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own
Thank you, Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Wow. Trash. Did you hear her? Thank you for describing the legal process. She had to put it in there to kind of shut.
Wow. Condescending little.
Yeah.
Exactly right. 100% right.
She didn't like being called out for fact checking him.
Yeah. Here's the thing though. And I urge everyone watching to tell everyone they know, download the CBP One app and overwhelm the hell out of it. Download it, apply 1,000,000 times, guys. Overwhelm the app to the point where it crashes. Just everyone get it, regardless of where you're at. Overwhelm it.
What's it called again? See what? I'll do it right now.
CBP One. If everyone downloads this app, their servers cannot handle the traffic.
It's worth a shot.
So much
on the book since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we
CBP
want to have
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor WALZ, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that.
That's
we
who you're
understand.
targeting.
So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks in Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm gonna give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in.
The
Everyone
largest
agrees,
ever has
including
come from
businesses, it would be
the current
destabilizing it.
administration.
It would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best. More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plan, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say, look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the body bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop. And we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
No, that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Okay, I'm going to pause it for a second, and I'm going to give it to you guys. We haven't heard from Mike. Mike, you want to weigh in on any of this so far? Can't hear you. You're going off. I just can't hear what you're saying. All right. While we're waiting for him, I'll give it to you, Nate. What's your take on any of this?
Sorry about. I think so far he's doing pretty good. I think calling out, those little games they play. Calling out the fact that they were trying to fact check him, calling out that Walz is, playing games with his words. I think he's doing a great job. The one thing that I think that, should be mentioned is that Trump came in, lowered taxes, and we had, massive revenue that was taken in by the IRS. That ultimately, so this whole thing about, Trump's plan will how is he going to pay for it? Well, it's going to get paid for because you got more people at work, more people that are actually bringing in incomes and paying income tax, more businesses coming back to America and paying corporate taxes. I mean, this is how, if you free up our economy to actually thrive, then what happens is you bring in more revenue, and that revenue ends up lowering our deficit. Not to mention that Trump lowered our trade deficit with China significantly. And that's another thing. All of those gains, though, have been completely erased by the Biden-Kamala administration.
What about you, Elena? Anything on this? Oh, before I leave you, Nate, he did say that they brought in 250,000 more manufacturing jobs, and I fact-checked him. And this was the job numbers that Donald Trump referenced that they had to correct, because they were saying that they brought 800 and some thousand jobs, which was lowered to the 250,000 jobs that are in that sector, in the manufacturing sector. What do you feel that? What do you think right now that you could say the most? What's the biggest dig you could give to the Biden-Harris campaign or administration as far as what our job numbers are? And why is that number deceptive? Can you hear me?
Who's that question to?
Oh, either one of you can grab it.
I didn't even catch it. So
All
sorry.
right. Elena?
No. I thought you were talking to Nate. Sorry.
I was, but I don't know. I don't know if he can hear me or not. He's talking, but we can't hear you.
Sorry,
Nate.
man. I thought you'd moved on. Say that one
No,
more time.
No. They said that they garnered 250,000 more jobs in the manufacturing sector, but they originally had said they had over 800,000 jobs. That was false. They had to correct the jobs numbers, and even still, we're operating at a much lower rate of the amount of people who are employed in this country. What I'm asking you is, why is that number, that 250,000, why is that still deceptive, and why doesn't it matter in the overall economy as far as jobs go?
There's two things that are kind of important to remember. One, WALZ was basically saying that Trump screwed up the whole COVID thing. Actually, Trump didn't make any kind of mandates at all. He didn't do any vaccine mandates. He didn't require businesses to shut down. He asked businesses for 2 weeks, but the reality, it was the Biden administration that basically fired a bunch of people because they didn't want to get vaccinated, and that was federal employees, that was military people, that was contractors, myself being one of those, and it was also the Biden administration's, their draconian restrictions that basically hurt the economy during COVID. Now, did Trump did some of the things that happened in the early weeks of COVID hurt the economy? Of course. And any president who had been in that situation would have made the same decision, because at the end of the day, they didn't know what they were dealing with. But Biden did know what they were dealing with, but he didn't care, because they saw it as a totalitarian move to be able to force people into vaccines. They were able to force people to shut their mouths. They were able to censor people through the Department of Homeland Security and CISA, and going into social media and silencing people. It's all been about control. That is exactly what it's about. And the fact is that any job creation that happened under Biden was not actual job creation. It was just the restoration of any jobs that were lost when people went back to work after COVID ended. And the fact is that we haven't seen any net positive jobs being created in this country at all.
Exactly. So, Elena, you heard everything they just said over the last few minutes. What was the thing that jumped out at you the most? And what is your rebuttal to whatever that is?
I can't right now, Eddie. I'm sorry. I'm struggling with tonsillitis. I'm falling apart over here. Sorry, Eddie.
Go get you some ice cream. Mike, you want to weigh in, bud?
I missed the actual question again, but
so you listen to everything they said over the last few minutes. What about anything that they've said to this point upset you the most, or what do you find most false, or what are your 2 cents on any of the topics they've gone through up to this point?
Well, like you said, the job numbers he referenced, those were the original numbers before correction. So, and that's typical of the left, to spew out lies, and they speak it into existence. And once it's out there, it's out there. It might as well be in print, because it's not going anywhere. And they just run on that, even knowing they're going to be fact checked afterwards. Right. I'm actually surprised. I mean, I shouldn't say I'm surprised WALZ is doing as decent as he is with 20 years. He's been polished. He's definitely better than Kamala. And VANCE, for only being in politics for a couple of years, I think he's holding his own. And I think he's definitely, I'm not one of those guys who are 100% sold on VANCE from the get-go. So I'm just getting to know him now. But he doesn't seem like a bad pick. I don't know.
So earlier, I wanted to weigh in on. So earlier, they were talking about buying a home, and they were talking about these programs that allow Americans to buy homes. But what he did not bring up was the fact that there are several programs in this country that were created to allow immigrants to get homes at no cost. And there are programs both in Chicago, and there are programs in California that allow that to happen. And I'm looking for the name of the program. I just had it in front of me, but I did so much fact checking, I have to scroll way up. It was something to do. It sounded like the Dream Act, but it wasn't the Dream Act. I'll let you know the next time that we pause.
You know, I'm glad those programs exist. Now I'm getting fired up, but it's like we just throw money after money after money at stuff that does absolutely nothing for our citizens. I can't. I just, it's exhausting hearing these things.
Actually, we also throw money after money after money, to help the citizens of other countries well before we help the citizens of our own. And that's what really fries me, is that all this money we keep sending to the Ukraine, all this money that we're giving to illegals that are coming to this country and not following our rules, violating our laws on day one entering into this country. And yet we can't take care of our vets. We can't take care of our people who just lost their homes, and many lost their lives down there in North Carolina. I mean, this is despicable what we've seen this government do.
So this is what it is, and I want to say this real quick. And we'll get right back to the debate. But it was called the Dream for All program, and I'm reading it on ChatGPT. If you guys want to type it in and see what it is, the Dream for All program gives immigrants a 20% down from the government. They give it to them. They give them the 20% to go put down on a home. They do not have to pay a single mortgage payment on that home. The loan does not come due to the lender until that immigrant sells that home. There's never been such a program for an American citizen. Not one.
Do they get to collect the capital gains on that house?
When I heard this talked about, when this was debated about, not here or talked about here, but when they were talking about it, when the program hit the airwaves, they were saying that the amount of the loan comes due. So if let's say the house increases in value, they get the equity in the home and only have to pay back the amount of the loan.
Completely wrong.
You know, we have a Section 8 program where you can use your Section 8 rent for mortgage payments now, so that Americans are paying other Americans mortgage payments. And that is bad enough. I'm appalled at that. You know, you get you work, you get your family together, everybody get a job, we're going to get a house. You know, I shouldn't have to pay for anybody else's house unless out of my own heart I want to do it.
Right.
But now we're doing it for illegals too. Great.
Yeah. I'm all for the private sector taking care of and running charity. I don't think it's the government's responsibility to steal from us to give to the charity that we have no business giving to. This is what happens when they took this away from the churches in our community. That's a whole different topic, but let's get back to it.
Rabbit hole.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor WALZ, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400.
What does that have to do with anything?
Rode your bike with your buddies till the street lights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher.
Nothing to do with
year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel through China.
Kamala, her response on her interview.
I came back home and
I was
then
born in a
started
middle-class
program
family
to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice.
Still didn't answer the question.
My commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand
There he
the
goes.
world. It's about trying
Fighting
to
for China.
do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment,
and
whether it
sending
be
your
from
jobs
teaching,
over
which
to
I was
China.
good at, or whether
China
it was
first.
being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
He did not
Governor,
answer the
just
question.
to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the
No,
discrepancy?
Good
for her.
that summer and miss.
Great job.
I will just. That's what
About
I've said.
time.
Just said he
He's
missed
been
the
there
boat.
so many
So I
times,
was
he's
in
confused.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in
Still
governance.
didn't answer it.
He
You
said he
weren't
missed
Thank you,
there.
Governor.
He just doubled down on
Senator
his lie.
Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear?
Because of everything she just
Well,
said.
first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages,
That was a good
rising
save
take-home
to
pay, an
deflect and
economy that
blame the
works for
media.
normal Americans, a secure southern border, a
I
lot
like
of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen
I love it when they
maternal
use that word human
mortality
rights in relation to
skyrocket in
abortion
Texas,
because they completely
outpacing many
disregard the human
countries in
rights
the
of
world.
the child.
This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are
Exactly.
ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond
All
to the
right,
governor's
can I
claim? Will
just
you
real
create
quick,
a
Freddie,
federal
'cause
pregnancy?
in his state, one of the things that he did was, you can, if a child survives an abortion attempt, they can just decide to let the child die. So you
The
put it,
Born Alive Act. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
The
So
child-
how do they prosecute anybody for neglect? You know, like second degree murder, you know, by neglect. I don't understand that.
Well, they can't because he took away the reporting requirement. So it used to be that the doctors, if that happened and the kid died, the hospital had to report it. He took away the reporting requirement. So
That's insane.
it's just it gets more morbid and twisted as you go on. These people are nuts. Sorry, that's
You're good. Right. I hope they do get to the part where they talk about this guy playing the Islamic call to prayer 5 times a day in his state across loudspeakers. I really hope Vance finds a time to bring that up.
Or the
monitoring
tampons in the
agency?
bathrooms.
No,
Yes.
certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it. And I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, I one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to
this is
respond
something
and
that
also answer the
really
question
needs
about
to be driven
restrictions?
home.
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died.
Killer baby.
In that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined
to
on
life.
geography. There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe
Can we
versus
address
Wade.
this?
When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this
pause,
subject,
Eddie.
and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same.
Go for it.
Just for the record, this lady, she was past the date where she could have an abortion in Georgia. So she made an appointment in North Carolina. She was late for her appointment. She gets there. They're like, yeah, you missed it. So they give her the abortion pill. She goes home. She takes one there. She takes the second one the next day as she's supposed to. She had twins that she didn't want because she had just moved into an apartment with a pool and a gate and a gated community. So that is literally the story. So the kids had to, be killed so that she didn't have to give that up. And she ended up with sepsis because she didn't, her body didn't fully expel her twins. So she had sepsis. The kids were dead already. She goes to the hospital in Georgia and they kept her there for 2 days while she was developing this horrible infection. And they talked about giving her a D&C, which is what she needed. She ended up dying, but nowhere in any of the records does it say that the doctors didn't give her a D&C because they were afraid of being prosecuted. And Kamala Harris has been saying that it was because of the law that she died. And it's not true. She died because she took a poison pill. And the doctors
meant to kill only her child or her children, and it turned out that karma came quickly and it got her.
She received her judgment in full that she brought on herself.
She missed her appointment. God was trying to save those children, and she insisted on doing it her way. It's horrible, but the law was not the thing that killed this woman.
No, of course not. And I would also like to address the entirety of Trump returning it back to the states, the abolishment of Roe v. Wade. America was built on the idea that Americans can self-govern. So if Trump is a dictator, he's an absolutely horrific dictator, because what he has a consistent habit of doing is returning the power back to the states and letting the states self-govern. As horrific as I believe abortion is, I believe that it is right to allow the states to decide for themselves what is allowed. And that way we can see full well what our country allows and what kind of morality is embodied by the civilians in that state. So if Trump just on his own, he did this during COVID, he did this for Roe v. Wade, he returned power back to the states to let the governors govern and for the people to vote for those governors and to vote for those policies.
Sure.
That's what America is. We are a republic, and it is a great thing.
Sure enough. Sure enough. Anybody else before we go in? Got anything else to say? All right, here we go.
I got a lot to say, but
Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are.
Unless it's a
to
woman
not do that.
child.
Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as
It's not
making
care
sure
when you
that we're
kill a child.
educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe
3,000 abortions daily.
You're free to
3,000
disagree with
Americans
me on this and explain
daily.
this to me. But as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not
pro-abortion,
It is true.
that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of.
So this is what it says. I got it in front of me.
Keep playing it. Just mute it.
The CBS News vice presidential debate.
So it's right here. It's the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. And it says the primary legislation offered discussed in the debates opponent of Biden administration claimed that the Democrats oppose this bill, which would require healthcare providers to give life-saving care to infants if they survive a failed abortion. The Biden administration, along with many Democrats, have argued that this legislation is unnecessary because the existing laws already provide protection for newborns. It is a way of backing out of the bill and not taking a position of protecting the kid by saying, hey, it's not necessary. Just like they said, we don't need to pass laws that prevent illegals from voting in our elections. It's already illegal. But look what's happening.
Well,
It's the
they
same
also
thing.
don't define an aborted baby that survives as a newborn. They define them as a clump of cells that should be disposed of. So there's the big
Correct.
difference there. Is that they say that they want to protect newborns, of course, but not these aborted things.
They call them the product, quote. That's the word. That's the product of the abortion.
The product. How about that? How about we start recognizing human rights when it should be? And that is the zinc spark during fertilization. That is the only consistent time that we have all experienced where a flash of light happens when the egg is fertilized. That is when human rights begin. So you can talk about the mother all you want and that she has rights and that she has autonomy, but you must also recognize that the human inside of the mother has rights as well, and it is our responsibility to recognize those rights. And
We got to go to a sponsor when you're done. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
All right. We'll be right back.
America faces challenges like never before. Economic uncertainty, social unrest, debt implosion. The foundations of our freedom are under attack. To restore strength, prosperity, and the American way of life, Trump must win.
I plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world.
Introducing the Trump token, blending the deflationary model of Bitcoin with the technological advancement of Solana. It's more than just a cryptocurrency. It's America's future medium of exchange. The Trump token pledges to donate 50% of proceeds, up to $50 million, to Trump's 2024 re-election campaign. Join the movement. Stand with Trump. Secure your future at thetrumptoken.com.
So also don't forget the doctor who actually put forth that bill, the abortion bill that testified in front of Congress. They asked her right to her face, what if the mother was dilating and she was giving birth? Would your legislation stop at that point? Would it be considered, I forget how he worded it, but essentially, can you still perform an abortion at that point, or does the law prevent it? And she said, no, the law doesn't prevent it. So all the way up until the mother's dilating, came in, she's going into labor, and they can do the abortion even at that moment. That is absolutely sick, and she said it right out of her own mouth.
I don't understand these people. That's murder. That's
the fact that we even have to discuss, like, well, if a baby survives an abortion, it's like, well, why is it that if the baby somehow survives, then you're supposed to protect it? How is this even a talking point? If it is worth protecting if it survives, then why isn't it worth protecting before you try to murder it? I don't understand. How is this even like?
While we have a moment, let's play the
physician would simply willing to certify that the continuation of the pregnancy would impair the mental health of the woman. How late are we talking about?
Well, so the suggestion that we've made in the bill is the third trimester goes all the way up to 40 weeks.
Okay, but to the end of the third trimester.
Yep, I don't think we have a limit in the bill.
So, is about to give birth. She has physical signs of that she is about to give a birth. Would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified? She's dilated.
Mr. Chairman, that would be a decision that the doctor, the physician, and the woman would
I understand
make at
that. I'm
that
asking
point.
if your bill allows that.
My bill would allow that, yes.
That's all. There it is, right there. I want to hear no more fact check. That's not true. It's 100% true. These people are murderers, and they're disguising it with fancy words like healthcare.
That's so upsetting.
Senator
I hate
Vance,
this style of debate.
gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out.
Nothing to do with hunting.
In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think. This is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's
Did he just
not
screw over his own point?
Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this
You
issue.
just talked about
no one's trying to scaremonger and say we're
Hey, hold up.
guns.
Let's
ask all of you out there.
Just pause this for a second, Eddie, because he just brought up a point that it's a really good point, that Finland has a high number of guns and no school shootings,
and guns that they would consider assault weapons.
Absolutely. And so he literally just made the point that it is a sickness of the mind. He made that point without even realizing it, that this is something that needs to be addressed outside of the guns themselves, because believe it or not, guys, guns are inanimate objects and they cannot fire on their own. So he just admitted that it is all about culture and that there is something wrong with our people today. It is not the guns, it is something else. Because if Finland has a high number of guns, then why don't they have school shootings?
Because they regulate their immigration. They regulate their immigration.
The CIA, MK Ultra, and a high level of SSRIs. That's probably why, in all reality.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, there we go.
Want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to
Yes.
go when we know there's countries around the world?
Sorry. We protect our money and the banks with security guards that have weapons. I had truant officers in the school where I went. Hell, we had a whole police station downstairs. A real police station with real holding cells in our high school. In Baltimore City.
Baltimore. In all reality, that shouldn't be the case. These kids shouldn't be getting fed SSRIs. We shouldn't have to bulk up because there's always ways around it. The problem
But
is
there
that
should
there's a
should be
sickness.
allowed to have like a security guards or police officers, truant officers at the school should be allowed to have weapons.
I agree. Yes, 100%. We should absolutely put up defenses. So you're right with that. Defenses
Whether it's
first, and then figure out the
SSRIs
problem.
or whether it's SSRIs or vaccines or any other number of drugs, the problem that we're seeing with big pharma is never going to go away until they reverse that stupid law that was passed in the 80s that basically allowed the drug companies to get away with, putting drugs in us that cause harm and not having any liability whatsoever.
Yeah. Which is exactly what they did with the vaccine this time around as well.
If you want to just add to it with school shootings, that they're doing social emotional learning, which focuses on negative feelings constantly. And all they're doing is, warping children's minds. That SSRIs, all of it, victimization. I mean, it just it just creates this perfect storm of hate and violence.
This is also the guy who, loved the fact that his city was burning and that those people during the George Floyd riots were tearing up his city. His wife reveled over it. So did he. And so he's acting like he doesn't like this violence, like he would stand against it. Well, when rubber hit the road, he was all for it. He didn't tell these guys to come in. He wouldn't even call the National Guard out. Donald Trump was urging him to. And then when he finally was going to get the National Guard in the streets of Minnesota, he leaked the time and day when they would be there so that the rioters knew when to stop ahead of time. And then he sent his police officers through the streets with paintball guns to shoot at people standing on their own porch. And there are videos of him, the police officers shooting kids with paintball guns. Now, I know that maybe paintball guns, but son of a bitch, they hurt. And your police officers were shooting kids with paintball guns. So it's terrible.
A world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was NRA.
Whoa, what did you just say? Hold on, what?
Safety. I'm of an age.
Whoa.
He became friends with school shooters.
Let's just hold up. I just want to be sure, guys. I don't want to misquote.
That's going to become a meme, you know
it's
it.
the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this.
Why is that?
Talking
So
about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that. But I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat.
Doesn't mean you're more prone to
Sometimes it just
suicide.
is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is
Based
a
on
healthy
what?
conversation.
What does that mean?
I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes
Tax
to the
more
high
people.
housing prices.
Give out free money.
Governor WALZ, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money
Internment
just
camps,
drive up
re-education
prices
camps for
higher?
MAGA
No, it's
supporters.
not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president
Nothing like a little church after you get done killing a few babies.
is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that
Neither
make
do
it
the
fair. Now, look, you're
immigrants
gonna pay
in
it back,
California and
and you're going to
Chicago.
pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common
More
ground
money
in,
for the war
but we can't
machine. 8
blame,
billion to Ukraine.
immigrants
8.7
for the
billion
only
to
reason. That's
Israel.
not the
6
case. It's
billion
happening in many
released to
cities. The
Iran.
fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing.
That's enough
but
for you
we
and
can
your
make sure that
facts.
the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up.
It's
Senator
all about
Vance,
that
I want
base.
to say something about
as far
the
as your
VA loan.
campaign's position, the promise is to seize.
So he is factually wrong when he says that you don't have to pay you don't have to ever pay the down payment, but they're financing 100% of the loan. That is not what they're doing with these illegals, where they're giving them basically $25,000. That is not what's happening with veterans. Veterans don't get home. They don't get a down payment assistance. What they get is they get 100% financing of the entire loan. So very different than what he is, portraying it as, and he should know better. He's a veteran.
It's also there are certain things that are benefits of serving your country.
Thank you.
Right?
Absolutely.
That he now wants to just water them down and give them away everywhere. And there were some really great things like the GI Bill. They want to do college for everybody now. What is the incentive to sign up and serve your country?
Yeah. And meanwhile, we have every single service, with the exception of the Marine Corps, has not met their numbers. In fact, the Army, I think, is down by a third of what they actually need in order to maintain a two-front war The only reason that the Marine Corps meets the requirement is because they're not required to meet a two-front war. They're the only service that is only required to meet one. And the fact is that you've got the Air Force, the Marines, the Air Force, Army, and Navy all showing, that they are not meeting their retention numbers. And so, yeah. So, what is the motivation for people to join the military now? Honestly, give up your rights for what?
Yeah.
Wokeness. That way, if you're white, you can not move up the military chain because you're white.
Yeah, it's only beneficial if you're transgender, a woman of color, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, forget it. Yeah, Rachel Levine. I hate even call. What is his name?
Rick.
Rick. Okay, Rick Levine. I'm never calling it Rachel again.
Wait, that was a
lands
dude?
to build homes, remove
What?
Rachel Levine?
That's a dude. Yeah, the first 4-star woman admiral is actually a man.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of somebody else.
Yeah, no,
we're good. Go ahead.
regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment, but Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in.
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office.
Oh, come on.
But it's, again,
we agreed not to fact check. Yeah, that's all they've done tonight.
I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are real.
He just said border crossings are down from when Trump was in office. He just said.
He clearly doesn't understand anything about drilling, because they drill under homes all the time here in West Virginia, because where they're drilling is way below the bedrock, and it has nothing to do, doesn't have any, impact on the homes that are sitting above the bedrock. And it's ridiculous. He should know better than that too, being that he's in Ohio.
Really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor,
Where's
your
the study?
time is up. But
He
but
literally
Senator,
said,
on
"Don't
that
blame the
point,
immigrants,
I'd like
blame
for you
Kamala
to clarify.
Harris
There are many
for bringing
contributing
him in."
factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a
But why
Federal
are they
Reserve
accusing
study
him of
that we're
this?
happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a
government
country of
overspending
doers. We're a
money.
country
Come
of
on. You
explorers.
can say that.
But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder
Blowing out
to
the budget
develop
every
our
year.
resources, makes it harder to
Printing
build things, and
endless
wants to
amounts of
throw
money.
people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. I think it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%.
The service, the TV service.
He introduced pricing transparency. You think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill, but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think it's an important
Is
point
it
about
just me or
President
did
Trump.
Rumble
Most people
just
don't have
melt
to agree
down?
with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs,
No, it's
Donald
good.
Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the
They have no
question about
option.
this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then
So
what
you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are
Maybe
able
I
to
just
make
don't
it,
care
and we
about it.
are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that.
Pause it for a second. I'm not one of those people who believe healthcare is a right. I believe in capitalism, and I believe if the insurance companies were allowed to operate across state lines instead of us having to operate within an exchange, then the doctor up the street would be able to compete with the doctor down the street, and competition drives prices down. not up.
The other thing too that needs to happen in order to drive prices down is the insurance company is allowed to basically hide the cost of everything that goes on. And so because of that, there's no shopping around. We don't get to know how much this doctor charges for. It's a completely regulated industry. It is the exact example of what socialism is. The two industries that basically are the closest to socialism in America are education and healthcare. And so, you know, you want to know why they're screwed up. That's why. So if they went to, you can go to Thailand, for example, and you get, basically get your teeth done for $100. You can get an MRI for $100. And it's because they've got competition. It's actual, they don't have insurance there. So the insurance.
I set up. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the insurance industry. Look, I think insurance is important for catastrophic type stuff, but for just regular healthcare, if everything went to privatization and being able to shop around and know what the costs were and everything, I think people would. I think the prices would come down significantly.
Absolutely, I agree, and that's why I say they should be able to operate across state lines without any exchange. And the way I set up a company that sold medical braces. They sold medical braces and they sold amputee like fake arms, legs, things like that. It's the company I set up. Now I know what these things costed. I mean, they cost anywhere between $50 and $150 in stock. By the time that individual went to the doctor who had to prescribe him that medical brace, that fake arm, leg, whatever, by the time it was prescribed to him and Medicare got involved, that same brace cost $5,000. Think about that. We're not talking about just a simple 100% increase, 50% MSRP, the way things typically are in the retail world. We're talking thousands upon thousands of % of an increase because of the bureaucracy between the doctor and the patient and the insurance companies. They are the problem. They are the problem.
Yeah, it's all the middlemen.
The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret.
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of
Go
time.
ahead,
We have a
Nora.
number of subjects to discuss. Margaret.
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries.
There is a child care crisis. They want to kill them all.
Without a national paid leave program for new parents.
Everything's
Governor Walz,
expensive.
you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who's an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families, cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the childcare shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the childcare shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide childcare options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor WALZ, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans.
So bring
after
him
the
in
economy
via
and
illegal
inflation.
immigration,
After
deem
the
it legal,
2020 election,
problem
President
solved.
Trump's
That's
campaign
their
and others
entire
filed
platform
62
right now.
lawsuits
The great
contesting the
replacement.
results. Judges,
Yeah, they can't
including those
get
appointed by President
Democrats,
Trump
new
and
Democrats
other
to stay in the party. I mean, the people are leaving the Democrat Party in droves, and the only people that knew that they're getting are brainwashed university students. And of course, once they get out there in the real world and they actually have to pay bills, they stop seeing the Democrat Party as such a wonderful thing. And the only people they have is their elites. So they got to go find Democrats from somewhere. And illegals is a good new ignorant group of people that they can make into voters.
What's the saying? If you're a Republican when you're young, you have no heart. If you are a Democrat when you're old, you have no brains.
Republican presidents looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there.
That's
in
a lie.
Minnesota, a group gathered
no,
on the
it's
state
not.
Capitol grounds.
He worded that very
and said we're
very well, because
But
they
he
did
made it
die.
sound like they not as a result of the beating they received that day.
Correct.
Sick
It's
Nick
not a
didn't
lie.
die. Yeah.
It's a skewing of the truth, but it's not technically a lie.
Well, it's a lie by omission because you have to say all the facts.
Yeah.
The way he worded that made it sound like the protesters beat police. They got hospitalized due to those beatings and then later died. That's not true. Sick Nick did not die from being hit with what did they say in the news? He was beaten with a fire extinguisher. It turned out not to be true. He died of a heart attack. He had a heart attack. Roseanne Boylan and Ashley Babbitt were the only two murdered that day.
marching to the governor's residence, and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands.
So why didn't they go
republic?
That's right.
Why didn't they go on record and condemn the 43-foot statue out here in Nevada where they got Trump dangling by the neck from a damn crane? If he's saying this political violence is not what they're really into and not what they're about, how come not one Democrat condemned it? Not one.
And then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter.
What?
A president's words matter.
Didn't we just go through this, Maurice? They are the ones that are saying that if Donald Trump gets elected, they are going to refuse to affirm him as president, and the Senate is going to prevent him from taking office, and they're going to use Section 3 of the article. The 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, to prevent him from taking office. Jamie Raskin said it, and it's not like a misinterpretation. He was very direct. He said, after we do it, we're going to need to be protected from the MAGA mobs, and he spilled his guts on it. And even saying it is treason. Even uttering the words it was treason. It's like telling someone you're going to kill someone or whatever. Just saying the words is the same as the crime itself, because you're laying the groundwork for that crime. They are the ones that weaponize the DOJ. Donald Trump has not once weaponized the law enforcement against his opponents. What they are doing is, oh God.
People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of
Bullshit.
power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did
Too
you want
close
to respond to that?
assassination attempts
Yeah, well,
on
look,
Trump
Tim,
already.
First of all,
Three.
It's really rich for
Too close.
Democratic leaders to
Third
say
one,
that Donald Trump is a
not so
unique
close.
threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll
We
have
ain't
my
shaking
help
hands.
whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016
Republicans.
said
Everybody
that Donald
does.
Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time.
It wasn't even
Facebook ads
500,000.
we need to respect the results of the election. I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive
Why'd they try to take him out twice
this
already?
idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. This is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You
Every time I hear
yourself have
democracy,
said there's no
my
First
eyes
Amendment
roll
right to
now.
misinformation.
It's like
Kamala
automatic.
Harris wants to use the
threatening or
power
hate
of
speech.
government and
The
big tech
communist
to
talking
silence
point.
people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this
Like
present
the
political
quote,
moment.
unquote,
I would like Democrats and
Democratic
Republicans to
people
both
of,
reject censorship.
You know what? I said it at the beginning of the show that I was going to give away a T-shirt, the "I Am an Enemy of Democracy" T-shirt. And you know, Q-Tip, you're here. You're at every damn live, and you're always in those chats, and you support us, brother. So DM me where I can send you your shirt, and I'm going to send you a PPN shirt with the "I Am an Enemy of Democracy" logo on the front, brother.
Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court.
Yes, you.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers should.
Yes,
wear
sir.
masks.
Governor does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government.
You can't
which is
yell
the right
fire
of
in a
every
crowded
American.
theater.
Senator,
By
the
the
governor
way,
does have the floor for 1 minute
if
to
there's
respond to
fire,
you.
Yeah.
and
Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not.
No, he
It's
did
not
not,
anything
and shut the
anywhere
hell up.
other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision
fuck Mike
to
Pence.
certify that election,
I mean,
that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time.
Here's the thing. If Donald Trump called for an insurrection, there would have been an insurrection. If Donald Trump called for an insurrection right now, there would be an insurrection. They know they're a bunch of commie traitors. They know they're a bunch of commie traitors. And what they're afraid of more than anything in the world, which is why they're setting up the censorship narrative, is that if they steal it and Donald Trump and the people actually revolt, they want to try to limit his ability, his reach, his social media presence, his ability to get on TV, his whole thing. They want to make sure that they're able to silence him. That's what the prison was about. That's what the censorship is about. It's all about one thing. They know whether or not Donald Trump actually wins this election, he can still run the country. Period. That's what they're scared of.
Time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential
This is
debate
brutal.
continues.
This is just terrible.
Yo, it's funny.
What?
You want to know what's funny here? CNN has already reported that won. Not WALZ. Damn it, Vance won. CNN reported Vance winning the debate.
Really?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now I'm gonna go to break real quick while they are, and we'll be right back.
In a minute.
America faces challenges like never before. Economic uncertainty, social unrest, debt implosion. The foundations of our freedom are under attack. To restore strength, prosperity, and the American way of life, Trump must win.
I plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world.
Introducing the Trump token, blending the deflationary model of Bitcoin with the technological advancement of Solana. It's more than just a cryptocurrency. It's America's future medium of exchange. The Trump token pledges to donate 50% of proceeds, up to $50 million, to Trump's 2024 re-election campaign. Join the movement. Stand with Trump. Secure your future at thetrumptoken.com.
There it is. So, CNN reported that Vance one-upped him.
Well, he said a lot more truthful things. I'll tell you that much.
But
Walz is a lot better at regurgitating headlines and
fake platitudes.
Yeah. A lot of the people that want to believe that Walz will win remember those headlines. And so he reinvokes those in a conversation pretty well. So when I say that, like, he's better than this at Kamala Harris, he's better at revoking those memories, at least for me, because I read the liberal headlines and what they say about Republicans and Trump and JD Vance and all those things. I'm sure you guys see them too, but I can remember those headlines in the way how he brings them up, and it's very clever how they do this. Is they repeat the same phrases to make you remember those specific headlines in the narrative that they're already pushing. He just has to, like, the media did the groundwork for him, and he's just like putting in the layup to help the people who want to believe in him actually think that he's doing anything of significance in his rhetoric against Vance. If that makes any sense at all.
You see his whole game plan is there's a lot of commonality here. He doesn't want to come off adversarial. So his plan is to go the other way. I'm going to completely,
because JD Vance
would wipe the floor with him.
Yeah. Well, no. I think it's because JD Vance started that rapport early on. It's like I feel like JD Vance made that first move. Like, well, I actually agree with him. And I think that, like he
worked
built
out
that rapport early on.
It worked out, but in no way, shape, or form do I ever want to give the impression that these guys are two sides of the same coin at all. One is completely anti-American, antithetical to anything constitutional. They don't care about their own citizens as much as they care about immigrants. He admonishes communistic governments. He befriends people from the Muslim Brotherhood and from Al-Qaeda. He's a terrible person.
Have they brought up the whistleblower and CCP connections that Walz has?
Not once. Not once. And nor did they bring up the Islamic call to prayer being played over the loudspeakers in the city.
I'm sure that's all been agreed upon.
Interesting.
Wow. Well, he should break the rules because there's no more debates after this. What are they going to do?
You are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something, not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight,
he started no new wars.
He will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me.
No shit.
Kamala Harris gives us a different
What a
option.
weird thing to say.
Now, I'll have to tell you,
JD
I'm going to be
Vance
careful about the
stands
quote,
with
but there's
Donald
one that
Trump.
Senator Vance
No
said
shit.
that does resonate with me. He said Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions
Politics
to the
of
middle
joy.
class, and she's centering
Another
you at the
communist
heart of that.
phrases.
All the while
Very
asking
much so.
everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance,
I'll tell you what, his exiting statement could have definitely been a little bit stronger.
Vice presidential debate of this
I will say
election
there is one thing that I really didn't like about it.
A reminder, there are just 35.
Is the fact that he kind of pointed out that like we need them in order to thrive. And there's something in my brain that when somebody tells me like the only way that you can succeed is through me, I just don't like that particular kind of messaging. And it was just the way that I'm gonna have to think about this and how to explain it. But I didn't like his closing statement as much as I wanted to. Like I really wanted him to be able to close that out. And it felt a little bit weaker than I wanted it to be. That's what I'll just say. What do you
Well,
guys think?
I think that he should have attacked him.
I'm tired. it's midnight here, and I got to get up early, man.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. I think that he had a lot more opportunity to bring up a lot of the more the issues that talked more about his communism and the statements that he made that we continually bring up. I think that leaving those things alone in order to get some of the common ground and be able to have a conversation really doesn't do the voter a lot of good, just because they want to have a civil debate. This is a debate for the future of our country and the future of the world, because the United States goes, so does the world.
Yeah.
You need to, this is a fight. This is a revolution. As I keep saying, it's not an election. And he didn't go there to make friends. And I didn't like that part of it.
Nate,
I'm sure there was a strategy behind it. I don't know that I fully understand it. I would have liked to. I do think that one thing I do think is that at first I thought Vance didn't come out strong enough attacking Kamala, but a little ways into it, he started doing that, which is good, because I heard one political commentator say before this whole thing that the whole thing is about attacking your opponent's running mate, and that is what I saw both of them doing. And I don't like the fact that all of these debates just seem to, I don't think they do a whole lot of good either way. And I do agree with you, Eddie, that I think in this sense, I do feel like if we have another 4 years of a Democrat administration, I don't know if you guys saw the post by Elon Musk, but I think he's right. I think that will be the last election that we have.
Correct.
Because and I think in some sense we're already there. Mm-hmm. The difference is they haven't secured all of these illegals onto the ballot yet, but or into the voter rolls, I should say, yet. But that's coming, and so I think we need Trump in there, if for no other reason, to deal with the border issue. I mean, that has got to be priority number one when he gets in. But honestly, I don't know if he gets in. I don't know that he's going to have much of a chance to focus on much other than probably World War III that this current administration is trying to get us into. So
yeah, they didn't talk much about that at all. And it's
no, they didn't. I mean, wow. you have Iran firing missiles. They talked a little bit about it, and I thought that Vance did a good job of pointing out that they wouldn't have those missiles to fire if it hadn't been for the Biden administration releasing all that money. So, but yeah, you're right. They didn't get into that. They didn't talk about the dollar and, the fact that the dollar is failing. And that's going to be, that's going to be another problem for whoever's going to be the next president, because you've got, there's no more petrodollar. So what's going to happen to all this? Only 1/3 of all of the dollars that are in circulation are inside our country. The majority of that money is outside the United States. And if that money comes back, you're going to be looking at hyperinflation. So they didn't talk about that. But, they're also not the president. So they're not running for president. They're basically VPs. And, I think that I don't know how beneficial these types of things are. So I guess, maybe what they're the whole goal or the whole point of it is to try to make themselves look palatable, to their constituents, but that's about it.
Right.
Well said.
All right, guys. Well,
all right.
I'm going to drop off. Good night. And
good night, brother.
It's been interesting.
All right. And Q-tip, don't forget, DM me with an address. We'll send that t-shirt out to you. And guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And guys, don't forget to give us a follow over at rumble.com/The Patriots Prayer. It's rumble.com/The Patriots Prayer. And you guys have a great night. Maurice, I know it's late for you. You always got to go to work early and stay late, but I smell the steak. It's cooked. I can smell it from here. So I'm going to go grab some of that.
I can also smell the steak. It's been coming through the door for like the last 15 minutes.
Yeah. That's about where
I
I'm
heard her
at.
fired up to put the sears on it. I was like, oh man.
There it is.
Yeah, but
there it is.
But you guys, we are on tomorrow again, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We are going to have another episode. So tune in. Rumble.com/The Patriots Prayer. Like Eddie said, God bless you guys. God bless America. Thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
And Maurice, I want you to check something out because it's got to be modified a bit, right? Just a tiny bit. And what I'm talking about is the outro video, and for the network. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's got to be modified just a bit. But here it is. I'm going to play it on the way out. So, guys, I'm just going to tell you, as I always do, the silent majority, you need to stop being silent and stand your ground. We will see you next time on the Patriots Prayer Podcast. Have a great night. Welcome to the Patriots Prayer Podcast. Here we don't just play to your feelings. We're rooted in honesty, and our foundation is based on Christian values, conservative beliefs, and a no-holds-barred approach. So if your feelings clash with reality, it's not reality that needs adjusting. If you're ready for an unfiltered view of the world, we're here to challenge the official narratives and confront the overwhelming tide of misinformation and call out wrongdoing wherever we find it. See, truth is our compass and God is our only judge. Right and wrong mean more to us here at the Patriots Prayer than right and left do. And a complacent, blind acceptance of the status quo will not be found here. We do not believe that things are this bad in our country merely by accident. So we investigate and dive deep in each episode and tackle pressing issues head on. Many podcasts claim that they're unfiltered, but here we actually mean it.